Welcome to another episode of the Quaggling Sand Podcast. I am recording this on the evening of July 25, 2021. We just wrapped up a dangerous 10-minute thunderstorm here in Las Vegas, and I am moving the show, or the episodes. I was thinking of trying to publish on Tuesday, so start the week on Monday, publish a show on Tuesday, but I am going to attempt in my final weeks in my humble abode, which I will get to in a moment. I'm going to attempt to execute my 5-day sprint plan. So I'm going to publish this on the 26th of July, which is a Monday. And then whenever you listen to it, consider the Monday sprint start. 5 days. There will still be distractions. Can't really help that. But by Friday, I will assess. There's still the weekend show note. I'm sorry, not show notes, but there's a weekend newsletter. So I'll add some notes to that about how it went. And then the following Mondays for between now and September will be a kind of a what happened and what's the next sprint. So pretty straightforward. I've been wanting to do this since I started the show, and the idea was to have other people join in the conversation, which maybe Sunday evening would fit into that model, especially if we're going to start hanging out at home again with all the rising case numbers. Test positivity numbers are nowhere to go but up. And here in Las Vegas, we've certainly been doing that. So I'm trying to stay home anyway. I mentioned I'm moving, so unexpected, but not a problem. It would have been easier if I was not moving. It would have been cheaper. All the projects I keep talking about, until they are actually launched, those are not making me any money. And I'm certainly not raking in the dough from Buy Me a Coffee, which that's not the goal anyway. But so the sooner I can get projects up and running, the better. So obviously, because it's inconvenient, first world problem. Was it on July 9th? June 10th, I received my annual lease renewal offer from my where I live. I live in an apartment complex in Las Vegas. You can hear my allergies, sorry. I'm also going to be drinking some coffee. You'll hear that too right now. Some Death Wish, extra caffeinated, blended Arabica and Robusta beans. It's been one of my favorite coffees, although I am finally, I got a small amount of money from Buy Me a Coffee, and that all those proceeds will go towards coffee, and so I finally got around to ordering some medium roast Death Wish coffee, because up until now, probably 20 pounds, 30, I don't even know. I'll count someday. But all the coffee I have from Death Wish has always been the dark roast. They recently, I would say, probably over the summer, I guess, of 2021 here, launched a medium roast, so we'll see how that goes. So you'll hear my commentary on that sometime in August for a sprint. Anyway, so I received my notification to renew, which I receive every year. And every year I wait because that's what I want to do. The cutoff is August 25. So I've usually gone in there later in August and I say, I got to renew my lease. And okay, sure. They've tended to know me just because of interactions just through the year. So they, hey, how's it going? Yeah, what's your partner? Okay, yeah. Here's the paperwork, digital signature, as in DocuSign style, and certainly not cryptographic digital signature, but we're not there yet. But yeah, so every year I've done that. And this year I received my notification and I said to myself, I should wrap this up so I can, I don't have to deal with it because I want to get some stuff done this summer. So I'm not going to wait till the last minute. Got to plan it out. Things are getting interesting. All of our numbers are up and all that. So got the notice June 10th, July 9th, I believe. No. Yes, July 9th, apparently they sent me a notice. July 12th, the Monday. So July 9th would have been 60 days. It's amazing how they keep track of that stuff. So July 12th, the Monday, I walked into the leasing office with the notice, and I said, hey, I want to renew my lease, get this done sooner rather than later. And they said, okay. And then the person I was speaking to, who I'd never spoken to before, got a little nervous, and he went into the leasing manager, property leasing manager, I guess, I don't know. Went into her office, and she came out and said, you didn't receive the notice? And I said, of? You don't want to hear that. And she said, oh, you're going to be receiving a notice. It's called a 60-day no-cause notice to quit. It means we are not letting you renew your lease. So to me, that sounded, that wasn't a good thing. So minor, not an argument, but I said, what? Bottom line, there's no reason. We just want the apartment back. Just like you could leave, we can not offer you a renewal. And I said, right, but I'm holding in my hand an offer of renewal. So was this not made in good faith? And she said, well, you're going to receive a notice that we have given you 60 days notice of a non-renewal. So to me, this is not the way to do business with somebody who has done business with you for 8 years, I should say. Right? I've lived here for 8 years. So I was a little disappointed in the way that was handled. Very cold. Very, I never met this person. I don't think I've ever spoken to this person. Ever. On the phone or otherwise. So it's just a very odd interaction. Not a great way to start that week. 2 weeks ago, as I post this. So, yeah, I was a little put off, and then panic sets in. Now, I will say, because I said, "What are my options?" and she said, "None here," which was another wow, some cold interaction going on here. So my theory, I didn't really stick around after that. I wandered out and commenced my search, which was fine. So we'll get to that in a second. But my theory is that people that have lived here for a long time are getting the lowest renewal offers. And if they offered me a transfer or basically if I were to try to renew a lease somewhere, even if it's not in the same place, like move to a different building, different whatever, I think they would be imagining that I would be getting a better deal than a new tenant or someone who hasn't lived here as long anyway. So that's my theory. Anyway, 28 hours after that, I was approved. I applied at another place, which was nearby. I walked over there. It was actually a place that I was going to live 8 years ago, but I chose this place instead just because of the timing. So at the end of the day, it all worked out well. But that does inject a serious amount of distraction. What are you going to do? It's the way life is. At the same time, Las Vegas is sort of the epicenter, not of gross case counts, which I think are somewhere in Texas, somewhere in Florida, I want to say Missouri. Those three states make up a bulk of the total number of, I guess, Delta variant cases or whatever. But our test positivity numbers are rising rapidly. And the scientist, if I could call myself that, I don't have the T-shirt. Don't back off, man. I'm not specifically a scientist, but I've certainly taken enough science classes in my travels. I'm a little bit concerned about our not only our growth rate of test positivity and hospitalizations. Excuse me, coffee. But I'm also, well, if our test positivity is up to, as of Friday, 14%, give or take, in Clark County, Las Vegas is in Clark County, as am I, then I have to imagine, let's say that half of that percentage, because we don't test tourists, where they are not required, they're not compelled in any way to be tested, to show proof of vaccination, to do anything really. Just show up, have a good time, leave your mask at home, pack yourselves into a casino or a venue of any kind, wander on the strip, which that itself is not allegedly as bad, but and then go home. So I don't know, nor do they report at this time what the what the destination numbers are like, as in, well, there's just no contact tracing, right? So ideally, somehow we would say some number of people that were in Las Vegas for 4th of July, say, 2 weeks later, of the say 300,000-ish, I think it was, tourists that were there, if you say 7%, like half of the positivity. So if you say 21,000 people, give or take, were testing positive in their city of origin, which we don't really. The Las Vegas Convention and Visitor Authority publishes visitor statistics, cities of origin, and all that, but they've really not been doing that. So we only have historical data. We certainly know the top cities: Seattle, New York, Chicago, San Francisco, Las Vegas. Traditionally, I guess, or historically, but 2020 and 2021 now are a whole new ballgame. So anyway, so my concern is we may be, what is it? They said Vegas could actually be a source of new variants just because of the churn of people from different places. We don't even have international tourism, nowhere near, if we have any, nowhere near normal. But certainly cause for concern to me. So what I'm getting at here, one, now is a great time to be technically aware, to read, listen, watch. I'm a big fan of This Week in Virology. Dr. Daniel Griffin does a weekly clinical update. He is on the ground, so to speak. He, as a clinician, he's savvy when it comes to, I don't believe he's actually in the lab doing research or sitting at a computer doing epidemiological calculations, but he is competent and qualified, and he also has patients who have died through the last year plus, and some who have not. Right, so he's on the ground, sleeves rolled up, mask on, and every week he does a This Week in Virology update. Dr. or Professor Vincent Racaniello's show on microbe.tv. So all that plugging aside, I consume that stuff weekly, and I think somebody who has no agenda other than health and well-being is probably a good source, who's competent and qualified, subject matter expertise, right? Not to be confused with people who have some subject matter expertise, sort of like Bill Nye. I would say I'm sort of in the same boat. Like I'm a more of a computer engineer. I think he's mechanical. Right? I think so. He's not a climate scientist. I am not an epidemiological researcher of any kind. So when people who are technically, we'll say tech savvy or mathematically savvy or can understand documents and articles, but I'm not trained in that, so I kind of have to read it with one eye and then use the other eye to watch things like these subject matter expert discussions. But when you hear people with a doctor and an MD in their names, and they're telling you things like vaccines kill more people than the virus does, and the ivermectin kerfuffle, which it looks like possibly the research was all bogus, but people are out there drumming it up because they think that they're experts, and then they get on some of the largest podcasts in the universe. We'll just leave that there. Anyway, so these are the sorts of things that are major distractions. And if you are listening to this now and you face similar types of things, whether it's homeschooling, kids are going to be going back to school soon. Are kids vaccinated? What is the situation when it comes to kids in school and part-time and full-time and masks or no? How does that impact you? Are you working from home? Are you working from home full-time, part-time? What, there's just total. And then what is your rent going up if you're renting? Is your neighborhood going nuts? I know here in Las Vegas, all they're talking about now is the rents are insane. There was an article, I think, on the local Fox affiliate. Can people in Nevada afford to live in Nevada? And then you have the typical, I think I read somewhere that it was about 40,000 people that moved in here to Clark County. I think it was 40. I don't know if it was 40,000 Nevada or Clark County, but the population skews like 75% Clark County. Some percent, those are rounded up. So there's obviously people between Washoe and where Carson City and Reno are, and Clark County where Las Vegas and Henderson and Laughlin are. But anyway, so tons of people moved in here. We have no water. We have this rising test positivity. We have people that don't want to work because they're sick and tired of the BS. And so, yeah, it's just been an interesting time. So now is a good time, and you may feel the same way. Now is a good time to take all of the things that you didn't do during 2020's lockdown and get to it. Why not, right? So that's the crux of my plan moving forward. Just checking the time here. We're not doing too bad. I didn't want to spend this entire episode talking about the thing, what do they call it? The human malware. But certainly it's a factor in our project efforts, and that is what this episode and what this show are supposed to be about, is taking ideas and implementing. So I wrote last week on the weekend newsletter, which I send out via Review, which is a Twitter property. I don't like Substack. I don't like Review. I'm just going to say it right now. Coffee time. So they're okay. They're not awful. They're not bad. I think Anchor is kind of bad. I don't mean the company necessarily, Spotify. That's a totally separate issue. But as far as the mechanics, the interfaces, I would like, and this does exist, so I don't have to complain. But I would like to see Substack and or Review, because they're free and because they've kind of caught on. Certainly, Substack has caught on. I would really like to see like automation tools, a better set of a better analytics feature, I guess, dashboard. Just a better set of tools for multiple editors or authors or contributors, I guess. And I'm sure you can go to MailChimp or Constant Contact. They probably have all those features. So the reason I was trying these out was to see what they do, how they work. But honestly, I would like to see I guess, well, I'll make the analogy to Tumblr. I've always been interested in how Tumblr, which is now owned by Automatic, for better or worse, better than Yahoo/Verizon. So the Tumblr notion of having object posts, right? I think you could expand that to be like, I want to post a podcast. And if you look at, I always mention this, schema.org has a fairly rich selection of item types. One of them is a podcast episode, part of a creative work hierarchy, I think. So I can post an object, and it looks like, to a human, it might look like just a normal post, and it might have, excuse me, it might have, the recording date, the publication date, the host, any guests, a link to the audio, an image for cover art, and so on. Right? There are a number of elements that are defined for that schema, for that item type in that schema. So suppose that there was a content. Well, they say don't write your own content management system. But what's out there right now is not acceptable, in my opinion. So suppose you had a data model that was inspired by the item type hierarchy on schema.org, and you supported those types natively, so that rather than posting a text, audio, video, chat, picture, I think those are the main Tumblr types. So now I can post any of the, or some subset, not everything, or maybe everything, I don't know. But I want to post a podcast episode and then have that be a part of a podcast series, and be able to publish content that is not only human readable but also machine readable, right? Hence the rich data, embedded microdata, or JSON LD, or RDFA. Those are the main schemes for publishing the schema data. But at any given URL, I should be able to say, hey, human, here's the episode of Quaggling Sand. But if you happen to be parsing the same document, you can pull out all the stuff that you would pull out from an RSS feed, and then some. And so eventually I would like to see one source of truth, I guess you could say. And by using HTML with microdata, for example, or if you use JSON LD or the RDF stuff, but I can, rather than saying, oh, okay, if I want to publish my my RSS feed, coffee time, if I publish my RSS feed, it's a subset, or I got to use C data, and you never know what you're going to get. And, iTunes has their namespace. The Podcast 2.0 podcast index, I guess, from Adam Curry is getting a lot of traction because he's the podfather and all that. But there's this love affair with RSS that I'm not a total fan of. RSS to me is an augmented sitemap at this point, and I think we can do better. We can publish a real, rich document in the form of an HTML, microdata enhanced, or otherwise schema.org compliant, or compatible, I guess. URL, right? Document. So I can publish my podcast episode. I can publish a podcast series. I can publish with images and with proper Open Graph meta tags for sharing in the usual places. I kind of wish Open Graph, the superset of what Facebook uses now, I wish those were getting a little bit more traction, but that's a separate thing. So, yeah, in my opinion, what I would like to see is a very rich, human readable plus machine readable document publication sort of best practice. And I think the Tumblr notion is interesting. And so what I would like to see is, for example, I should be able to, through the week, contribute to my content management system, my database, however I'm keeping track of this stuff. Maybe just in GitHub. Like what's going on, what's the status, what's the updates, maybe like a daily journal or a bug count or whatever, whatever I want. And then at the end of the week or at the beginning of the week, I guess, I should be able to say, I would like to publish a newsletter and pull in all of the item types of these things, or some part of an item tree that's part of a project, or however. I haven't really delved into the relevant item types from schema.org in that regard. Although I could always create my own if they don't exist, and I'll get to that in a second, which I would like to do. Itchy beard. Which I would like to do for mobile vending, but I'll get to that in a second. So when I generate a newsletter, not to say that I'm like computer generating the content, but I'm assembling the newsletter form, which can be done. There's nothing magical about that. You're just digest, or I think Google Groups does that. You can subscribe to a digest of a Google group, for example. So yeah, why can't I generate my Substack or review or other newsletters that way? So the answer is I can. Maybe not through them. I don't know if you are familiar with Amazon Web Services. It's a little company up in Seattle area. Is it simple message service? You can send and receive. Actually, well, you can certainly send. You can receive if you just set up your own mail server, but you can send mail all day. You don't want to send mail through Gmail, etc., right? So you can create your own newsletter or other mailing service. You can use something like Mailman to run a mailing list, or multiple. So right now, in order to try the the Substack and review platforms, I created 2 newsletters so that people could subscribe to one or both. And I published different content in each because I wanted to try Substack and review. Okay. So now I can accomplish the same things using Mailman, which is an open source mailing list manager. If you're familiar with Listserv or Majordomo or Easy MLM, if you're a Qmail person, I've used all those. They're fine. They do exactly what you want them to do. And so yeah, there's really no reason to be hobbled by the limited feature set of Substack and review for examples. And I'm sure there are others. I didn't even look very hard because I just wanted to sample what the market was bearing. And right now, I think, in a good way, I think there's a return to base functionality, which I think is a positive, because these major silos of they want to own everything. That's all they're worried about, is adding features and eye candy, and just send me an email with what I want to read from who I want to read it from. If I get a Substack newsletter or a review newsletter, they're pretty basic. They're just enough rich content because mail clients have trouble. They have a subset of HTML basically. So you don't get every option as you would with a full web page, but you can certainly send the equivalent of an Open Graph feed as a newsletter, right? So going back to my Tumblr-ish example, if I had all of my podcast episodes and my journal entries from Quaggling Sand projects, my sprints during the week, come Monday or come Friday or anywhere in there, anyone who wanted to subscribe could subscribe to a digest version, could subscribe to the full newsletter on Monday, could subscribe to updates daily. So there's a lot of flexibility you can get. These are all, there's nothing new here, nothing earth-shattering. But except for the what is essentially the don't do this because you shouldn't spend your time on it content management platform as a project. And there's a Medium article which I'll stick in the show notes for today. It's like I'm not looking at it right now. The title is something like, I wrote a CMS and you should never do that, or something. And because he has the person who wrote it, I think it's a he, I'm not sure. But they have a company creating CMS software. He said in that case, or whoever it is, in that case, it's fine. But if you don't need to write your own, you shouldn't. And I said this when I was at Salon, right? Why are we in the business of writing a content management system? You're in the business of publishing news and opinions from the left. Not like the literal argument I made was the New York Times is not designing and maintaining printing presses, right? You buy them. You have somebody else maintain them, So there's really there's no specific reason to do what I'm suggesting here, except that as a experiment, and because eventually I've mentioned FriendFeed. No, I'm sorry, FriendFeed. FriendFeed was an awesome service that Facebook bought and killed. That was annoying. But FriendVen, which has always been this idea in the back of my mind, which is a better way, a better mousetrap, I guess, a different way, how about that, of discovering things that other people that I know are sharing, reading, posting. So not necessarily, kind of inspired by Feedly or Google+, the Circle notion, right? Coffee time. My coffee is no longer hot. It's a little warm, but I should get one of those mugs. So if you imagine a Tumblr, if you've never checked out Tumblr, Tumblr has gotten a little weird over the last decade. It used to be a very easy and open place, and then Yahoo censorship rules came in, and that kind of turned it into something a little bit different. It's still an interesting tool, but the character has changed quite a bit. But if you were to check that out, I've never really been a fan of their reblogging or note concept. Like commenting and sharing are kind of different, but they do generate RSS feeds automatically by default and some other interesting features. So if you take the things that I like from Tumblr and you have this platform that can organize, I guess, I can create content and stick it into this item type collection, some hierarchy of podcast episodes and stream videos and whatnot. And suppose I'm subscribed to YouTube channels. I want to share a video with you. Well, okay, embedding a YouTube video is interesting. Substack does it. Review does it. So, okay, piece of cake. But why don't we make it a little bit easier? So just like a Tumblr video object, maybe I want to share a video object as in my stream of items that are published. Maybe it's embedded automatically in a newsletter, but also visible as one of the items that I'm sharing or making visible in general in my FriendVen feed. And maybe I want to make it visible to my coworkers or my family. So the Venn part, right? The intersections. So granular, specific item classifications, item types, and tools to enable more easily discovering and sharing and, managing, creating, publishing. All these things to me seem like we've kind of stagnated and we've centered on WordPress or RSS feeds, really. Also, I think those have stagnated even more. So yeah, my overarching goal is to create this platform that I can prototype things like FriendVen or the non-personal, non-individual version of similar idea, which is Munibits, which is about community data. I would like to, one of these days, like before I move out of my current abode, I would like to deploy finally what is essentially a purpose-built content management system, the mobile vendor tools. So those are content management that's centered on schedule, place, time, items, menus, or other non-food products that are available at a given location and time. So moving, I call it moving vendor, moving commerce, moving consumer is what I used to call it. And people would confuse that for, yeah, you can do mobile commerce, not mobile, moving. Like the place that you ate at or bought your soaps and lotions yesterday at a farmer's market or wherever, they're not there today. Like they're moving, and you can be moving too. So yeah, I have all these tools, and these are all these are mentioned or will be mentioned on the Buy Me a Coffee profile page that I maintain, and that's super simple. No obligation to buy coffee for anybody, but if you want to, you can. But I'm basically treating that as an out-of-band sort of one-stop hub that links to things. My personal blog, not published, not up. So I don't need to maintain that, or I don't need to have that as a roadblock. So this is an out-of-band place that also happens to have this tip jar functionality. That's nice. So if anybody wants to contribute to the caffeine supply, that's fine. But as I've said many times before, some of these ideas that I'm talking about are where I hope to generate my revenue, especially ahead of my big move. So the first thing for the sprint this week is, I was checking the time, we're 37 and a half minutes in on this episode. Not too bad. So the first thing I want to do this week is finally, which I've talked about several times, and I've advanced the cause, and I spoke of this, or I wrote of this, I should say. I wrote of this in the weekend newsletter last week. So the 23rd of July on review. So if you follow the review profile link in the show note newsletter, or it should appear in your podcast description, which you can never guarantee. So that's part of the reason I don't like that stuff, the CData hack. So I mentioned some stuff about Postgres, and so I have tons and tons of code. So I need to get this sorted in a deployable, testable state so that I can start building these ideas on top of this stuff. So my Postgres core is very schema and stored function centric, mostly to avoid problems I learned about firsthand when I was at salon.com, or when a friend of mine was working his first, I cannot remember the name of the company, but his first sort of delving into data-driven website development. Their database, they were using Oracle. So I was learning PostgreSQL so we could have some discussions about stored procedures, stored functions, predefined views, materialized views, some other neato features. And the thing I learned definitely firsthand, if I didn't learn it from my friend at his job, from our discussions, if you enable willy-nilly, haven't used that term in forever, access to the database to create tables, and which is fine if you own your own database, right? The microservice architecture, you own your database, you deal with it, you just answer my function calls, you respond to messages and commands, all that. So that's fine, that's different. But if you're looking at for a small small beginnings. So I'm by myself, right? So if I'm going to create this database and then say I brought in someone to work on stuff, contractor, other employees, whatever, during that transition period, this was what I learned not only from my friend at his company, but then when I was at Salon, when you have regime change or when you add people to the mix and they have their particular views. My favorite story, which is not story time this week, but sort of relevant to this particular topic. When I was working at Salon, the accounting department, and Salon was a public company at the time for 10 years, I believe. The accountants wanted to know how many people were subscribed, what was the total liability for promotional items, things like this, right? So they said, how come, I'm going off memory here, but how come we get different numbers? Like the totals don't match from the weekly and the monthly and all that. So I found, you got to run through. So some years they were doing Perl, other times they were writing stuff in Java. Who knows? So because the coding was left to whoever was writing whatever, and because they were not database people, they were just hackers, really. Like, I'm going to write a query to generate subscriber count, and it's going to run now. And if you're a database person, you know what that means. If you're not, maybe you don't. But you can't run a report now and compare it to a report run now at a different time, right? So you have to run them at the same time, or you have to run them with the same parameterized time. So I want to find all the new subscribers between, A and B, not now. So I want to find the week ends Monday morning at midnight or whatever, consistently, right? And then the other problem was we had people that were using, in that case, they're using MySQL and Oracle. MySQL for membership database, they had people were using PHP MySQL and just editing stuff by hand. So who knows what's going on at that point? So the take home for me was, until you have enough of a scale, I didn't learn this then, but the culmination over the years, until you have enough scale where you need to bring in people and you have microservices, or you need to scale out horizontally, or break it up into shards and multiple databases and replicating. Until you get to that point, there's a place somewhere in the middle where you have to invite other people to write code against your data model. And as I witnessed firsthand, those people don't always have your data model in mind. They have their own agenda. And not that I'm not trying to say that's bad, but it's not necessarily healthy. And you start getting, all the negatives about coupling and race conditions on changes. If somebody goes and messes with the data model in a monolithic or at least not well-defined microservice architecture, right? If they go mucking with things, especially manually editing, I'm just going to go ahead and edit a table entry. Maybe other things that depend on that need to be updated, and maybe there's like an atomic interface to when you change that entry, you need to change another entry, right? So if you leave that to chance, then you end up with what they had, which I will tell you, this is like a bonus funny story, I guess. After my task, once we implemented the letters to the editor feature, which was that was a learning experience. My next task was to once and for all get a consistent subscriber data model and reporting structure for accounting. And as a public company, they needed to be able to report actual revenues and recurring revenue totals, right, from subscribers. So with accurate numbers, and then the gifting scheme was totally broken, and just a pile of mess. And after a couple of months, and it was the last thing I worked on, and it was arguably one of the reasons I wanted to get away from a non-technical engineering situation. the CFO at the time said, "You're telling me what? You're telling me that for the last however many years that we've been a public company, our subscription numbers have been fictitious? You mean all of our 10Qs have had bogus information and would require amendment? Or you could stop working on this." So that was a fun time. So anyway, so I have this data model. I have sort of a prototype scheme. I would like to kind of decouple the schema architecture I have. I have a schema per application area, right? So mobile vending, the mobile vendors are in a schema, a namespace in Postgres. Excuse me. And then menu. A menu could be a food item or a non-food item, right? So if you if you sell soap or honey, or you're a food truck or a food cart and you're selling hot dogs or burritos or whatever, or you're selling coffee, or or it could be a service, right? So your menu is not necessarily food, but it's your inventory that's for sale can vary per day. So there's a menu schema. There's a vendor schema, there's a venue schema, there's a schedule schema. So I kind of isolate those out and manage, which vendor is going to be at which venue on which day and what's their menu for that day, right? Piece of cake. Done. So the last thing I would want is for someone to come and join my efforts on whatever basis and then say, oh, I want to modify the schedule, the way the schedules are updated. But you also have to look at the menu and the venue, right? So the interconnection, the coupling, which is not always a great thing, yes, of course, but in this scheme, those are coupled in the real world, so they kind of have to be coupled in your data model. So if you have a nice interface that manages that stuff in the database, then if you are a Python programmer or you're coding in Golang, or Node, whatever, JavaScript. If you're writing code and you're accessing the database, especially if you're modifying data, you should be able to do your updates, your object creation and updates. And by the way, I have a no delete policy, right? So if you hide your SQL delete command, like don't enable that. So you can mark items deleted. So if you have an API, a stored function that will mark something deleted, but not actually delete it, that can save you some trouble later, right? Because you have a history. So yeah, if you hide your database access behind an interface, that it can be consistent, it can be audited, it can, like in my case, I have it generate PostgreSQL notifies. So I can have something else listening and do other things like some housekeeping and whatnot if you touch certain objects. So you can encapsulate all that into this stored function interface. So that's the stuff that the first half, I need to like finalize for version 1, I guess you could say. And then I have a basic presentation layer that I want to finish up that I already had working, but I've got to update all the dependencies on current stuff because it's been languishing for so long. And then my Terraform stuff to roll it out to AWS in my case. So there's all the stuff that I really need to spend a good solid week and just integrate. I've already differentiated, so now I need to integrate. So that's my week. My week will be finalized database, at least the core, right? I want to be able to build. So in general, I want to be able to build my ideas on the core that I've been pondering and designing and hacking on and redesigning and repondering for too long, right? So I want to get what I call the RCT core, the really cool technologies core, PostgreSQL, internet infrastructure as code, front end, back end. I want to get those pieces in a deployable state so I can move forward on some of the other things I've talked about today. So that is the sprint for the week. that is what this episode and this podcast are supposed to be about, is what we're working on and ideation, bouncing ideas around. And that's why someday I will have a guest. But for now, it was me, and me. So if you listen to all this, I appreciate your patience. That's very nice of you. So we have about 10 minutes before we hit the hour. So story time this week is college. Back in my college maker days, before there was a maker fair. That is a long time ago. So my my good friend and sweet mate for our senior year, and my lab partner and collaborator, Bill, and I were taking microprocessors in our senior year from Dusan Petranovic, a professor from Montenegro. It was right when they were having a little bit of an argument in Yugoslavia about being a country. So he was happy to be in America teaching. So Micro Ps was it was an interesting class. And part of our class project at the end, our final project, was a lab with partners, right? So Bill and I had to design and build a breadboard microprocessor. And so he gave a state machine sample design, and we had basically unbridled access to, PALs, programmable array logic parts, PALs and PLAs, in fact, I think. We had ALUs, we had register chips. These are all dips that could fit in a breadboard very nicely. And so Bill and I would go for Thai food at Sanam Luang, and we brought our notebooks and our pens and our appetites, and we'd have Thai food, and we would bounce ideas around about our microprocessor design, and then we implemented it. So we basically had a micro store in an EEPROM, or EPROM, I guess I could say. Well, these were UV erased. Yes, as in with the window, and we would stick them in the UV eraser. And so we had like 4 or 5 of these things. So you basically have a debug erase cycle going. You remember all this from the good old days if you're also from the good old days. So we had a micro store in EPROM, and the micro store would be the micro store had micro instructions that would run chip selects and send basic commands like, I think it was a 4-phase micro instruction. So things like putting data on the bus, reading data off the bus. So you could do a basic load and store in one instruction between registers or into the ALU. You could send the ALU a command to like operate on something. And there were conditionals, right? So yeah, your basic microprocessor. So 4-phase micro store with, I think we used a PAL to do chip select routing, and like I said, an ALU, registers, a bus that all the chips were on. And the micro store clock was a toggle, so we could actually debug everything. So we'd toggle the clock through the micro store, generate the instructions, and you could see the output. It was very cool. I have to say, it was probably one of the most interesting things I did all through college. And Bill was a brilliant, smarter than me lab partner, which is always nice to have. So the funny part, though, was that we made the entire 3 breadboards. I mean, you're not talking those, 1 chip per board. We're talking, I have one of them. I think there's like 3 sort of channels with 5, what do you call it? Breads? 5 places to put the wires in. That's the usual, right? So 5 on either side of channels, and then there's, I think there's 5 channels. So we could have 5 columns of dips and wires everywhere. So we had 3 of those boards. Everything was wired in blue wires. So that it was quite a look. It looked pretty cool. But Professor Petronovich came over, and I showed him, here's how it works, and he was very impressed. We were the only ones who did something ridiculous like this. Like other people did a micro instruction or a state machine, kind of okay, yeah. But we had really thought this through, and we were really like, you know what, let's just do something nuts. So Professor Petronovich comes over and he's like, hey, this is very nice, very nice. We always he kind of sounded like Dracula, like you would think Dracula would sound, like maybe the Count from Sesame Street a little bit. So he said, what would happen if I removed a blue wire? And I said, I would hit you. Don't touch it. So he took my humor. It was not, clearly I wasn't threatening him. But he was very impressed, but he said, I would not use the blue wire. I would, yeah, okay. We did it for fun, but, certainly you want to make your stuff debuggable, and using one color of wire on something as complicated as we had come up with was not the best way to go. And it kind of goes back to my database schema thing, right? Like if somebody goes and pulls one wire out or changes one column of one item in a table without accounting for other stuff, then who knows what's going to happen, and hell breaks loose. So that was a fun time, though. Microprocessors, we I think I got like an A-, because I think what did he do? That one I think we got A or A+ or something. Advanced micro P's, because we turned in our paper late by a couple days, he gave us an A-, just to be a nudge, as my mom might say. So yeah, that's the balancing robot. That will be for another time, when Bill did a hand-built, machined aluminum gyroscope. Not your MEMS Bosch 9DOF chip that costs $10 or $5 or however much they cost now. Now this was an actual spinning aluminum gyroscope with an far too slow and low resolution HP, I think it was, optical encoder. Nowhere near enough of a sampling rate to sustain anything more than a couple of degrees of deviation from vertical. So that's another story from another time. But yeah, so my maker days were really, literally hands-on maker days. It was a good time. And one of these days I'll get back to that. And that is what the Worky project will be, which is something we'll definitely talk about another time, especially because there will be a podcast and probably a video stream of some kind associated with that. So I'm looking forward to that. So I'm really quite excited about sort of, and this is the sort of thing that we can talk about if you want to be a guest on this show, because you probably have some things that you want to work on too. But I would like to take all these ideas that have been languishing. Anybody who's ever spent more time thinking about trying to get things done than actually getting them done, you know where I'm coming from. The year of the pandemic, I should have been more productive, but a lot of time thinking and reading and researching, and some minor hacking, but not releasing and launching and all that. So since we're probably going to get locked down again eventually, or at least I'm going to avoid too much going outside, and since I got to start packing, so that's a bit of a distraction. No better time than to distract myself from packing with getting something up and running. So I will report in via newsletter on Friday, and the next Quaggling Sand episode 1 week, which I believe is August 1st, 1 week from Monday. We will see where we are, and I look forward to talking about the trials and tribulations of launching a cloud project for real, rather than talking about the road to. We need to get through the on-ramp onto the freeway and see what breaks. So looking forward to that. Thank you for listening. I hope you will visit the buymeacoffee.com/Dan Hugo profile page. Links to this show, Hugo Floss, which I do with my mom, which sounds weird, except my mom's been a podcaster for more recent years than I have been. I think I talked about Radio Sunnyvale, that's another time. That was a while ago. But Hugo Floss, the Quaggling Sand podcast, and the FFS Talk podcast, which is more topic-driven. And ideally, we'll also have guests. And if you'd like to be a guest on there, drop me a line. So if you send email to join, as in I want to join the episode, the next one, join at quagglingsand.com, hugofloss.co, or ffstalk.com. So an email to join on any of those. And just pick a time and a place and a topic, general topic, and we'll go from there. So I'd love to have this as a two-sided conversation or more. I'd love to get some live interaction, especially if we can start doing some, we can call it sprint support. If anybody else wants to join in on a weekly sort of, here's what I'm working on, or here's my goal for the week, and we can maybe it will be helpful if there's a line in the sand once you've set it, and then the following week we'll follow up and we'll see where we are. That would help me, probably help you. Maybe other people would want to listen in on that. So my voice will never get better. The allergy scene here, especially with all the fire, our air quality is a little off, and so am I. On that note, like I said, buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo. Check it out for the links. Go for the links. Stay for the, if you want to contribute to the caffeine supply, that's up to you. No obligation. And there's a set of links there. There are a set of projects there that are not linked to anything yet, but those will, in short order, hopefully, become links to launched, early launch projects that you can actually try out. And you can tell me how awesome they are. That would be cool. On that note, I thank you again. We're winding it down. Just a few more. No, I'm just kidding. Post-credit scene coming up. Thank you for listening. Tell your friends. Join in. Tell me what you're working on. Let's palaver. Be safe this week. Thank you. Bye-bye.